6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you. 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical. So step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.
Hi everybody, hi, welcome to Sunday Night Stories, brought to you by 6 Feet Apart Productions. Sorry for the slight delay, a little bit of a technical snafu at my end. Anyway, I'm really pleased and delighted for our Paired Stories special. I'm very excited. So as many of you know, there are so many different stories out there. I mean, hundreds of thousands of stories. And when you boil them down, they tend to fall into two different camps. Personal storytelling, which are true stories about yourself, and then traditional storytelling, which are more are based around myths and folklore and fairy tales and don't tend to be true. And then sometimes very clever storytellers can mix the two together. So what we're going to do today, though, we've decided that because what stories tend to do is to make meaning of the world, and we want to have a different way of doing that, and try and show you how personal stories and traditional stories, sometimes even though they go on different paths a lot of the time, they can actually share a common theme, and can actually come together a bit more. So the Storytelling Association of California, who we are collaborating with for this particular show, and they've done huge amounts of work to help us with this, what they wanted to do was explore pairing a personal storyteller with a traditional, and each storyteller is telling a story based on the same theme. So we've got tricksters, we've got common sense and creativity, and two pairs, a pair for each of those themes. So they did this, the Storytelling Association of California, which I'm going to call SAC from now on because of my tongue. And so they first did this in San Francisco at the San Francisco Free Folk Festival, which was, it's normally obviously in person, but this year not, it was online. So they did that in June, and it received so much interest and enthusiastic response to it, they decided to do it as a more of an ongoing thing. So we at 6 Feet Apart wanted to do it with them. So we are thrilled to be able to help them, start it off with this, this groundbreaking idea and get it going. Now, if you're interested in telling a story, either traditional or personal, as we go forward with this, then please, I've put our email address into the chat, which is 6feetapartproductions@gmail.com. So if you're interested, then do send us an email and I'll pass it on to SAC for you. So, and also please do put stuff in the chat, tell us where you're from, what you're doing, give our storytellers some love, do some hand emojis, clap for them, because obviously they can't hear you and they can't see you. So maybe they can virtually see you, which would be lovely. So what we like to ask you to do is to grab a drink, close the curtains, turn off your phone if you can, make it a bit of a theatre-like experience, as if you were actually there in person, even though sadly we're all in our sitting room. Although I have to say the chairs are a bit more comfy at home, aren't they? Drinks are a little bit freer. So, and did you know when you're watching it on YouTube that you can actually watch it on your telly, so you could have it really big? Just a little thought there. Okay, so that's enough about me and all the different bits in the beginning. Let's start with our first pair. Now they're going to tell a story all about tricksters. And our first storyteller says that she's been telling stories ever since she needed an alibi, which is quite funny. She's been telling stories at the Asian Art Museum for more than a decade. And she's also, everyone here is a member, obviously, of the Storytelling Association of California. So this storyteller also tells stories in schools, churches, and anywhere she can get people to sit still enough to listen to her. When I'm introducing people, I also have wheedled out of them a fun fact, anything just personal or that not many people know about them. So this person's fun fact is that they come from a long line of Looney Tunes. What it actually means is her maiden name was Looney. And as she said before, her first story was an alibi. So she was obviously a little bit of a rascal in her day. So telling our first traditional story on the theme of tricksters, please welcome Anne Riley. Anne, I think you're going to have to unmute yourself, please. And you're still muted, Anne, so just need to unmute yourself.
All that would do.
That's it. Perfect.
Well, good evening. Good evening. Good evening. It's a joy to be here among many of my friends. There is a tradition of Akbar and Burble stories based on two historic figures. There's Akbar the Great, famous Muslim emperor, and Burble, who was a Hindu that actually served in Akbar's court as his grand advisor. This story is called Pearls of Truth. One day, Akbar's queen was walking through the palace, and her beautiful silk sari managed to hit a beautiful vase that was sitting on a shelf, and it fell off and it broke. Oh my goodness. Oh, how can I tell him that? I can't tell him that I broke it. She reached down and quickly picked up the pieces, hid them behind her back as Akbar walked into the room. Oh, good evening, my darling. It's something is amiss here. What happened to that beautiful vase? I've loved looking at it with the mums and the tree branches in bloom. It's I'm sorry, but a cleaning person came and picked it all up because it needed to be cleaned. She lied. Well, that was fine for that evening. The next morning, when Akbar awoke and was feeling full of himself and ready for the day, she confessed. Oh, Akbar, my great one, I have to confess to you about that vase. I accidentally broke it. I'm really sorry. Well, of course I forgive you for breaking the vase. It was obviously an accident. But I have trouble forgiving you for lying to me about it. I cannot have liars in my court. I'm sorry, you have to leave. Go to Agra and stay there until I thought about this. Oh, but oh, my lord, please, you have to go. So she picked up her things and went. The very next day, Akbar had all of his counselors and his servants appear in front of him. He said, all right, now, you know how I feel about justice. Now, I need to know, is there any one of you who have ever lied? Well, they, of course, had heard all about the queen, and they didn't feel very good about fessing up. So all of them played, no, they, of course, had never told a lie. And in walked Burble. Burble's asked the same question. Oh, Your Highness, well, you know, I've always tried very hard to be honest and truthful in all of my dealings, but you know, of course, that probably there have been times when I thought, you know, a little tiny lie might, you know, smooth things over. You're telling me that you have lied? Well, I cannot have liars in my court. You leave, you leave. You're an exile. And so Burble left. Well, of course, the queen heard about this, and she wrote a letter to Burble asking him to please come visit her in her exile in Agra, and that maybe the two of them could help each other. Well, Burble thought about that, and he thought, yes, that does sound like a good plan. I think we could help each other. So he went to Agra, and he went to the most famous jeweler there was, and he asked the jeweler to please find for him some perfect little tiny pearls. And he got those pearls and he looked at them. They were perfect. They were all tiny. They were so tiny. They were the size of rice seeds, of kernels of rice. He called them his rice pearls. And he then went into the palace and bowed low, and he said, Your Highness, Akbar the Great, I've come back to show you something. When I left for my exile, I met this farmer, and he had these seeds, and they're perfect. They look like rice seeds, but actually they have some magic to them. And if you sow them in good soil, they will sprout. And soon when they grow, you can harvest a whole field of pearls. Really? Let me see those. Huh. Well, we certainly have to try that. Burble, tomorrow morning, I have the perfect field. We will sort them. So, of course, the next morning, the word was out. There was a huge crowd. They all crowded around, and the emperor came. All right, Burble, sow the seeds. Oh, no, sire, I can't sow them. You see, the condition of sowing these is that it can only be sowed by someone who's never told a lie. And, well, I've already confessed to you that I did on occasion maybe tell a lie to help. So, but your wonderful servants and courtiers here, I know that they are truthful. And of course, they're all mumbling. And so all of them refused. Oh, but Your Highness, you are the one who is the most devoted to the truth. You are the one who should sow the seeds that grow the pearls. Oh, Burble, I can't sow them. I mean, of course I believe in truth, but as growing up and when I was a lad at some point, I am sure that I must have, I don't think we'll ever find anyone in this whole kingdom who's never told a lie in his whole life. And Akbar realized what he had done. And he sent for the queen to come back. He forgave Burble. The queen made a glorious return to the palace. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anne. Oh my God, I loved all your voices. I bet you are the best bedtime story maker. And when you go to the libraries, I bet everybody loves you. Fabulous story. So our next storyteller is a recent transplant to the Bay Area, having retired from a 30-year career as a film editor in Hollywood. So we have a big Hollywood star with us. Since arriving, he's been taking acting workshops with Donna Davis, and he's had a solo performance workshop with David Ford. He also began singing in the bass section of Luminescence, which is the choir of UUCB under the direction of Dr. Bryan Baker. He's also joined a troupe of Never Too Late of Stagebridge in Oakland, which is the oldest senior theatre company in the country, apparently. So now this person's fun fact is that he has no middle name. I'm a little bit jealous because I have two middle names. It's always been a bit of a pain having two. So, but he's got no, and when he was in the military, they called him NMI, no middle initial. Who knew, eh? So please give a very warm welcome, telling a personal story now on the theme of tricksters. Please welcome Terry Stokes. Again, Terry, you're going to have to unmute yourself again. We still can't hear you at the moment?
Yeah, there we go. How's that? Sorry. Good evening to all of you. And I'm very honored to be here and telling on 6 Feet Apart. This event is really cool, and I'm happy to be part of it. I had the good fortune in my life of having 4 uncles. I loved each one of them dearly, and each one had a major influence on me as I was growing up, not the least of which was my Uncle Neil. This story is an excerpt from a letter that I wrote to his wife, my Aunt Lola, the day after he passed away. Dearest Lola, today I drove from Tucson, Arizona to Albuquerque, New Mexico, over 400 miles of nothing but flat, barren desert, broken only by renegade outcroppings of rocks and boulders against a crystal blue sky. I put a mellow tape in the deck, and it was a perfect place with the road clear ahead of me, perfect place and time for reflection. And of course, my Uncle Neil was in my thoughts. Many memories came flooding back to me, but driving as I was at that time, triggered one which jumped ahead of all the others. It was the occasion when I got the opportunity to bond with my uncle one-on-one as uncle and nephew. I was probably 10 years old. I was very impressionable. And I was given the opportunity of riding with him in a trip from Sanibel Island, Florida to Black Mountain, North Carolina. Driving with him in his pride and joy, his brand new, bright green Hudson Hornet. With my mom and dad in their car and Uncle Neil and I in his Hornet, we left the island at the same time and were soon heading northeast toward Jacksonville. I watched the speedometer climb as he shifted expertly through the first 3 gears, and then he did something that I'd never seen before. He shifted into a 4th gear. I've never seen that on my parents' car or any other car for that matter. And as we were going along, the speed increased and he held it steady at 70 miles an hour. We whizzed by other cars. The engine seemed to hum and purr even more smoothly as our speed increased. And my parents' car just fell far behind and soon just disappeared from view in the rearview mirrors. More than anything, I was aware of the pleasure that my Uncle Neil was experiencing at that moment. I think it was not so much about showing his young, wide-eyed nephew this special automobile that he owned, as it was from his pride of owning that Hudson Hornet and its being the very fastest form of automobile transportation known to man at that time. And he took great care to educate me about that fact. And I was fascinated by all the buttons and knobs and dials on the dash. So I reached out to touch one with a little red dot on it and stop, my Uncle Neil cried. Don't touch that knob, ever. I quickly withdrew my hand and sat there chastened, thoroughly convinced that I had almost done something horrible that might have ruined the engine of this prized automobile that he had, or also sent us careening off the road or something horrible. He let me sit there uncomfortably for a long moment. And then he turned and with a totally deadpan face and in very serious, somber tones, he said, "We don't have flight clearance from the tower. We're only cleared for road travel on this trip. If you pull that knob, airfoils project out of the side of the chassis, and this car transforms into what the FAA classifies as an airplane. With the foils extended, we would lift off the road at approximately 10 to 12 feet above the surface. Our speed would increase to the top of the speedometer. You can see it there, 140 miles per hour. And we'd arrive in Black Mountain long before your mother and father ever got out of the state of Florida." I thought about that for a long moment. I must have looked at him somewhat quizzically because he continued. He said, "You don't think I would just drive any car, do you, Terry? That I'd be content with a car just because it had the world's most powerful engine? The first car with overdrive, with aerodynamic design? This isn't just an automobile. This is a Hudson Hornet. And Hornets fly, don't they?" He was so adamant and impassioned in his argument that my skepticism vanished instantly, and I no longer doubted that flying in a car was indeed within the reach of possibility. Now, this was a brilliant strategy on his part. Any chance of my reverting to the stereotypical pesky little kid whining and constantly asking when we would get to our destination was eliminated. The long trip from Sanibel Island to Black Mountain, North Carolina was made much shorter, I'm sure, for both of us. And by my constant fascination with that red knob and the idea that at any moment we could leave the ground and soar above all the ordinary mundane traffic, fly far below. The hours and miles literally flew by. I have another memory of my Uncle Neil and his Hornet. When I was about 12 years old, he allowed me to drive that car around the grounds of my great aunt Lil's estate in Black Mountain. I toured the many twisting gravel roads of my great aunt Lil's 80-acre property, alone by myself, my feet barely able to touch the pedals, my head barely above the dash. My very first automobile solo. And I did so with great care, and precision, and pride, never taking the car out of second gear. And even though there was rarely any traffic on those roads, I always came to a cautious full stop at every intersection. I was the pilot, solely in command of my car/automobile/aircraft. And I'm absolutely sure that I know what you're thinking about now. And I admit I was sorely tempted, but I never once touched that red button or that red knob. Later in my life, I learned and discovered that my Uncle Neil was a consummate trickster and jokester. But even today, I often wonder what that red knob actually did. Thank you.
Excellent. What a really good story. I cannot believe you never pressed that red knob. I would so have pressed that button. What a very obedient boy you are.
Yeah, Ben.
Thank you, Terry. That's a really great story. So our next storyteller is coming to you. She normally works with educators, as well as sharing stories all around the world now that we're Zooming, which it's opened up the entire universe, hasn't it? She's also the co-chair of the Storytelling Association of California, and she was really, really one of the driving forces behind putting this together. So I'm really, really thrilled. And her fun fact is that she just finished her first 5K on the sloth running team. I love that. Apparently it was walking around the block quite a few times. I thought, if that's the way you do it, I'm going to do it next time. Anyway, so I'm delighted to welcome, telling a traditional story on the theme of common sense. Please welcome Sara Armstrong.
Well, thank you, Claire. It's so lovely to be here. It's just very exciting that this is happening this evening. The story I want to tell you is about 4 boys who were born about the same time in a village, and they became fast friends. They grew up together, they got in trouble together, they went to school together, they did their chores, and they would finish their chores and their schoolwork, and then they would discuss their plans for the rest of the time they had that day. Sometimes some of the ideas were a little bit risky, and one of them would say, well, perhaps we better think this through. But they went about what they did, and they had a wonderful time. Well, they grew up, and the time came for them, as it does for us all, to go out into the wider world. Now, I should tell you, 3 of the boys really were scholars. They thought scholarship was everything, but they didn't have much common sense. Whereas one of them wasn't that interested in scholarship. He had a lot of common sense. Well, their plan was to go out into the wider world and to learn what they could in 2 years' time, and then come back together to the village and share what they had learned. Well, the village was supportive, gave them feasts, advice, offerings of food, and anything they could think of to send these boys off into the wide world. And off they went to the 4 corners of the earth, and they were learning and being with other folks for 2 years. Well, 2 years passed, and back they came as they agreed. Again, the village people were so delighted to see them, happy that they were strong and healthy and grown and had learned a lot, and there was more feasting, more celebrating. After some time, the young men decided that they would go together, out together to seek fame, fortune, and the favor of kings. So off they went, again with much applause and support from their families and friends in the whole village. They hadn't gone very far when one of the scholars said, "You know, there's one among us who really can't help us in our search for fame, fortune, and the favor of kings. We should probably leave him here." But the other said, "No, no, we've grown up together. We've gone this far together. We've done everything. Let's continue on our way." And so they did. Well, not long after that, they came into a clearing where spread around were bones of what had been a large animal. Now, one of the scholars said, "Oh, I can show you what my teacher taught me. I can recreate the skeleton of this creature. He will look as he once was. The bones will look as he once was. Gather round." So they did, and pretty soon there was a skeleton of a big cat. Well, now the second scholar said, oh, now I can show you what my teachers have taught me. I can put blood and organs and sinew and skin on this creature, and he will appear as he once was. Gather round. So they did, and there before them was a magnificent male lion. Now the third scholar said, "Oh, I can teach you what my teachers taught me, which is I can breathe the breath of life into this creature and he will be as he once was. Gather round." When the man of sense said, "Maybe we should think this through. If you breathe the breath of life into this creature, he will eat us." "Oh, no. Gather round, I will show you what I've been taught. And the man of sense said, "I will climb this tree the better to see you at your work." And he did. So the third scholar breathed the breath of life into the lion, and indeed, he ate the scholars and padded off into the jungle, very satisfied. The man of sense came down from his tree and walked on the path. Scholarship is less than sense. Therefore, seek intelligence. Senseless scholars, in their pride, made a lion, then they died. This is The Lion Makers from the Panchatantra. Thank you.
Lovely. Excellent. Thank you. That's a bit of a scary story about being eaten by a lion, but thank you so much. Our next storyteller is going to be telling a personal story on the same theme of common sense. And she's been telling stories all her life, but been telling stories on purpose for 30 years, ever since graduating with a certificate in storytelling program from the Dominican University in San Rafael. She's told stories locally, nationally, and internationally. And her passion is helping others to find their voice through storytelling. Now, Jean's fun fact was that when she was only 7, she must have been quite a feisty 7-year-old, I might say. Her horse once bit her, so she bit it back, and it never happened again. It's a brilliant story. So please welcome our very feisty personal storyteller on the theme of common sense. It's Jean Ellisen.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. If I am there, you can see me. Okie doke. That's good. Sorry. I was 7 years old when I got my first horse. We'd moved from the city of Oakland to the country of Lafayette, California. My dad promised that when we moved to the country, we could have a horse. We hadn't been there long, and I said, "Oh, we're in the country. Where's the horse?" And he was a man true to his word. And we went looking for a horse for me at 7 years old. Now, when I first met Cricket, that was her name, I fell in love right away. It was love at first sight. She was white when she wasn't real dirty. She was white and she had blue eyes, just like me. Well, I had a steep learning curve with this horse because we took her home that very day. I asked the fellow we bought her from how old she was, and he said, "Oh, well, she's 8 or 10. I don't know." And I said, "Well, when's her birthday?" And he said, "Little girls, you don't celebrate horses' birthdays." But I wanted to. On a Saturday morning, I went to collect her from the pasture and brought her home and tethered her in the driveway of our house. And I was grooming her, getting ready to go for a ride. Now, my dad, he taught me everything he knew about horses, which was 0. So it was like, pull up your bootstraps and learn by doing. That's kind of the theme of my life. I was wondering as I was looking at her how old she really was. And I had heard somewhere that you could tell the age of a horse by looking at their teeth. Like there would be a date stamp in there or something, I don't know. And there were no books, no how to care for your horse for dummies books back then. So I decided, heck, I'll do it. I'll look at her teeth. So I reached forward. I had eye contact, blue eyes to blue eyes. And I said, Cricket, I'm going to find out how old you are once and for all. And then we can come up with a birthday and have a party. How's that? She looked at me like, huh? I lifted up her rubbery upper lip. What I saw was really disgusting. There was green slime and hay and grass, and it was a nightmare. Dad, hey Dad, Cricket's teeth are disgusting. I need to brush them. Can I brush my horse's teeth? You want to brush your horse's teeth? Well, yeah. You really want to brush your horse's teeth? Well, she can't do it herself. So, my first lesson in common sense and a little bit of help from my father. He said, go get a toothbrush, an old toothbrush, and get some baking soda from Mom and put it in your hand and make some toothpaste like we do when we go camping sometimes. And that's your tool and your toothpaste. Good luck. So he left me to my devices. I had my toothbrush. I had my toothpaste, the original baking soda toothpaste. And I walked right up to my horse and I said, Cricket, I'm going to brush your teeth. You're going to do what? You're going to love it. I lifted up her rubbery upper lip and I started to brush, brushity, brush, brush, brush. Her ears went back. Her ears went forward. Her ears went back. Every muscle in her body is rippling. She is not a happy camper. I said, oh, we're not finished. Now take it easy. And I took the toothbrush and splatted all that gunga on the sidewalk. Ooh, it was disgusting. Did I say it was disgusting? It was. So I, undeterred, my second lesson in common sense. I said, I'm going to finish this job. So I got my toothbrush, more toothpaste, and I started brushing again. Brush, 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 brush. Her ears went back and her ears went forward. I took the toothbrush and splatted it on the pavement again. And I said, by this time, Cricket just has no idea what's going on. And I didn't have as much idea either because this was all new to me. So I got the toothbrush and the remaining bit of baking soda toothpaste, and I lifted up her rubbery upper lip and I started to brush again. Ha, 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 da, 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 brush, brush, brush. Her ears are going back, her ears are going forward, and then she did something that, I couldn't have expected. She got kind of a dreamy look on her face. If a horse can have a dreamy look, that was it. And she calmed down. The muscles relaxed. It was like she was enjoying this operation. And then she opened up her teeth and bit down on that toothbrush. And there I was, 7-year-old me, and a great big white horse with blue eyes. And a tug of war ensued with the toothbrush. Hey, Dad, I could use a little help here. Having a little problem. And I told you he was a learn by doing kind of guy. He looked at me like, well, figure it out. No, he wasn't anywhere to be seen unless he was peeking around the corner to see what I was doing. But I had heard somewhere, I don't know where you get this information. It just kind of comes to you. I reached under her chin and tickled under her chin because somebody said that makes their lips move. And it worked. I held onto the toothbrush, I tickled under her chin, and her lips started to move. And she had a really satisfied look on her face. And then she opened up her teeth and bit down on that toothbrush. And I'm having this tug of war. But the tickling under the chin and her parting of the teeth was just the right thing to happen because I could extract that toothbrush that was bit almost in half. Oh, I put it in the garbage can. And I looked at Cricket and she looked at me like, is that all there is? And I vowed that my first real experience in common sense was to never try it again. Now, in this day and age, I would just hope that common sense could be more common. And that's my story. Thank you.
That was such an excellent story, Jean. And you wonder why your horse bit you. Maybe he was like, he didn't like having his teeth brushed. Oh, that's so funny. I always wanted a horse. And now, of course, if you want to know about brushing teeth, you just Google it, wouldn't you? And then the answer would instantly appear. How do you brush a horse's teeth? Or how do you tell its age? I know. But back in our day, we didn't do that. So anyway, good experience. Now, our third and final pair today are telling a story on the theme of creativity. Now, you might recognize our first storyteller because she was on our third story that we ever did, a storytelling show of Sunday Night Stories, when she told a story about great escapes. So if you haven't seen it, go back and watch. It's up on our YouTube channel. You can go back and watch it. Now, this person has been telling stories ever since she learned to talk. And she works at the Fairfax Library and posts a weekly blog of book reviews. So definitely go and check that out. And that's on the library website. And she also hosts Marin Poets Live. So never ever dull moment. And her fun fact, which is kind of odd, I have to say, is her day is not complete until she sits down with a book and a bone. And apparently, literally, she likes to gnaw on a bone and she has quite a little stack of them. You'd never know it to look at her. So please welcome, telling a traditional story on the theme of creativity. Please welcome Neshama Franklin.
Hello, everybody. I am so excited to be here. It's a melding of two worlds or many worlds because all these guys or people, we don't use guys anymore, have been in my world because we belong to this SAC and we're like a tribe, we're like a guild. But then there are my new best friends, Claire and Regina. They call me the #1 fan. And here we are in the virtual world. We can all tell together. So today I'm going to tell you about a giant named Odon. There was once a giant named Odon and he was horrible, huge, mean. He gave himself a job, which was to go around in the forest and stomp anything smaller than he was, and everything was smaller than he was. And he did it with great glee. And you can imagine how the forest creatures, even the big ones, because he was bigger than anything, were terrified. And what can you do when there's this threat of a huge foot coming down on you at any minute? And nobody could figure anything out until the little pecoy bird. She said, I have a plan, but I'm going to need some help. And will you sign up? And she pointed out you could say some rather unlikely creatures. She said, you mosquito, would you come? And how about bed bug and crab and eel? And they all looked very confused and rather frightened, but they were desperate. So they said, we will come with you. And she said, I have plans for you, and we will see if they will work. And so it took them a whole day going upriver in a coconut shell to get to the giant's house. And they arrived a little before sunset. It was very good timing because he needed every piece of daylight hour to stomp and tromp and terrify and destroy anything in his wake. And then they entered his house, which was way up in the trees. There was a bamboo ladder. Well, the peacock bird, she could fly up there with the bed bug hitching a ride. And the mosquito could go on her own wings. And the eel slithered up and the crab crabbed up. And when they got to the giant's house, she deployed them. She said, okay, bedbug, you know where to go. And the bedbug went to the giant's enormous bed. Mosquito, you perch on the rocking chair. You'll know what to do. Now, eel, you kind of secrete yourself near the threshold, and you will know what to do when the time comes. And crab, you go into the wash basin. You know you're pretty inconspicuous, and when the time is right, you will know what to do. And she, what did the peacock bird do? She hid herself in the ashes of his fireplace. Now, there were a few embers, but she stayed away from them, and she was the same color as the ashes, so she was very inconspicuous. And he came home, and they could feel it vibrating, thunk, thunk, thunk. The ground shook, and you should have heard that bamboo ladder. And he arrived into his house. He was satisfied, never satisfied enough, but satisfied for the day, but tired. And he flung himself into the rocking chair because this is what he did to decompress from his day of destruction. And he let out a big breath. It was kind of like a typhoon. And then the mosquito started. And he whipped his head around and he said, what's that? Nothing. Hey. And he took his great hand and he clapped it over his ear. The mosquito was very fleet. And all he did was give himself a kind of a little concussion. And he said, I got that. And he took his other hand and wham, he clapped himself on his other ear and his head was spinning. And he said, I don't like this, but there's a mosquito net and he won't get me there. And he dove into his bed under the mosquito net and he tucked the mosquito net around him. And then the bed bug got to work. Bite, 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 bite. Very small, but even huge giants have tender places. And so he, I don't like this. I don't like this. Something has invaded my house, some kind of demon. I have to see what it is. And he went over to the fireplace to pick up an ember to get a little more light. And the peacock bird just went, and the ashes flew into his eyes. And he went over to the wash basin to wash the ashes out of his eyes. And the crab went right onto his chin. The crab is not very big, but very tenacious. And he shook his head and he said, there's something definitely haunting my house. I hate it here. I have to get out of here. The crab let go. He made a beeline for his doorway. The eel had stretched over the threshold. His huge feet slipped over the eel's slippery body. He did not descend by bamboo ladder. He plummeted. Crash! And it was like an earthquake everywhere it was felt. And that giant ran far from that forest and has never come back. Now, what do you do when there's this huge destructive creature around? You figure out a plan if you're clever like the peacock bird. You find talent out there and you ask them to help you. You get courage together. You get community together. You vanquish that giant. Let's hope we can learn something from this story. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Neshama. Let's hope we do actually definitely take a little bit of a hint there. I'll try and find a little mosquito and an eel somewhere. I'm sure we can put them out in a very obvious place. Now, before we bring on our very final storyteller, I thought I'd give a couple of shout outs to people in the audience. We've got Kate, who's been on our show a couple of times. Lovely Kate. We've got Ed, we've got Linda, we've got Diane, Melia, and Linda. So please, thank you all for coming. Thank you for putting wonderful things in the comments on YouTube. Give us some more love to our storytellers. So our last storyteller, who's going to be telling a story, a personal story on the same theme, began storytelling for adult audiences in 1994. And he and Marianne Ferrante did celebrations, and they did 11 of them at Los Mundanos College. And he also taught early childhood education there. Since then, he's organized a variety of storytelling events in Davis and has also been able to tell stories all over the place. California, Ireland, Holland, Sweden, you name it, he's told a story. Now, his fun fact, I have to say, was my personal favorite. His personal fact is that when he was in 5th grade, his 5th grade teacher, who was a bit of a witch apparently, he was able to burp the longest word in the English dictionary, which is anti-disestablishmentarianism. And he did that 3 times when it was his turn to give a speech instead of a speech. And I do think he got into quite a lot of trouble. But anyway, anybody who can burp that has to be like a personal favorite of mine. So please, telling a personal story on the theme of creativity, please welcome Ed Lewis.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So you heard about my burping experience with the 5th grade teacher, and you'll hear a little bit more about her in this story, The Witch. The story is called The Pierce College Preschool Jazz Choir. Now, after I finally gave up on my misguided need to get my father's approval by following him into the business world, I followed my mother's advice. She always said that I was good with children and I should do something with that. And I followed my heart. And so I went to a private teacher's college after I had my degree in business in Pasadena. The first class I took helped me realize that I did want to work with children. So it was called Magic Mountain, Unleashing Your Creativity. And the premise of the class was that we as teachers needed to unleash our own creativity if we were going to work with children and help guide them in releasing their creativity. So it was a 1-unit class at the professor's house who lived in Malibu up in the mountains. She had 5 acres. So 15 of his students camped out there for the whole weekend. We had 18 hours of class time we had to put in. We had many amazing group and individual experiences. The first one was art. The assignment was to go out to her woodpile, find a block of wood that we would paint on, wander the property, find materials that we could use to paint with because there were no paintbrushes, get some oil paints, and then find a place to create our masterpiece, and we had 2 hours to do that. So I got all those things together. I went under a weeping willow tree right next to the pond, and a weeping willow tree is my favorite space to be in. I sat down, I got my piece of wood out, and I took the orange oil paint first, and I squeezed it onto the wood. And then I took a crow's feather that I had found, and I dipped it in and I started to move it around, and tears just flowed down my face. And I had the image of my 5th grade witch of a teacher, Mrs. Sincock. She was standing with me in front of the class with my picture. She held it up and she said, "This is not a pretty picture. I told everybody to draw a pretty picture. This picture of this B-52 bomber is an ugly picture." And she ripped it up in front of the class. Now, I was almost 11 years old. I looked up at her and I said, F you. And I ran out the door. I was halfway home when the vice principal caught up with me. He brought me back up to the principal's office where I got suspended for half a day. I had to lean over his desk, and the vice principal took a board and whacked me 3 times on the butt. And I was suspended for the rest of that day. Well, of course, you can imagine I hated that teacher. And when I sat down with the next hour and a half with that painting, I had given up painting in 5th grade. My mother said she couldn't figure out why I just stopped painting, drawing, because it was mostly war stories and cowboys and Indians, but I just stopped doing it. And I hadn't done anything with that since. That shame just lived with me. And I poured my emotions into that painting for the next hour and a half. I didn't have any skill to draw anything in particular, but I just mixed paints and and I still have it. It's just this abstract piece of wood that was about 8 by 10. Well, after that was over, we did many creative activities. One of them was in storytelling. What we did was sat in the circle and she started a story. She said, when I'm ready to pass the story on, I'm going to say, and then you continue the story. The next person takes it and continues the story. You go anywhere you want with the story. Well, when it got to me, I told the story about a 5th grade teacher that was this witch, and all the children got together and they vanquished her and she never came back. And then I said, and then, well, there were many other things that happened, but I was feeling so creative and just unleashed. And I went to my job. I was working as a preschool teacher in a college lab school in the Los Angeles area. And with my co-teacher, we had 24 children that were ages 2.5 to 6. And I love that kind of teaching because the kids taught each other. And all the parents went to the college. So it was childcare for them. And then it was a lab experience for nursing students, child development students could come in and do field work. Well, we got together and said, we have the college. This is a great resource for creativity with our children. So we contacted different professors. And the first one I contacted was the art professor. And I said, we would love to have the kids come up and view what the students are doing. And he said, well, right now we're working with clay. So I said, well, I'd love to work with clay with the kids. If I buy some clay, will you have it there for them? And he said, fine. So we came up, the kids observed the students. They were making bowls. They were doing ceramic sculptures, animals, all kinds of different things. And they let the children sit next to each student. And the students worked with them and they created these amazing art pieces. Which eventually, we did this for the whole semester. They fired them, they painted them, they fired them, they gave them as presents to their parents. We also went to the sports facility and the kids got to play soccer with the soccer players. We went to the farm. There was a college with a farm. The kids learned how to milk cows. We went into the orchards and we got fruit and we got seeds from the garden. We took them back. We made our own garden. We grew the produce. We harvested that produce. And then we went to our woodworking area and the kids built a produce stand. And then we sold the produce to the parents, to the teachers, to the staff at the college. The older kids were in charge of what to do with the money. So I got toy magazines, gave them to the older kids. They worked with the younger kids and they picked out things that they wanted. And then they figured out how much money they had and what they could buy. And then we bought the things and had that material. We did this for many years in the program. My favorite though was to go to the music department and we would go listen to the band and the orchestras, and my favorite was the jazz choir. And every year the jazz choir had a competition with all kinds of college jazz choirs throughout the Western states. And the judges would be famous groups from Los Angeles, like the Manhattan Transfer or Al Jarreau. If you know anything about music, they were at the top of the game in terms of jazz singing. So they would end up with 6 winners And the winners would then perform on Saturday night in the gym for $10. And whoever were the judges, they would also perform. So we were listening to the jazz choir sing, and they were doing jazz scat singing. And one of our children, Brandon's mother, was in the jazz choir. So if you don't know jazz scat singing, it goes something like this. Ba-doo wah ba-doo ba-doo wah da doo ba-doo ba-doo wah ba ba-doo doo wah da. And they were doing this, and half the jazz choir would sing and the other half would answer them. So we took that information, the kids were fascinated, and I walked back, and by the time I got to the football field, I went, I can teach these kids how to sing jazz scat music, because one of the teaching techniques that I always used to teach songs was echo, call and response. It could be any song. It could be Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star if you were trying to teach it, or you just go Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and the kids echo it back. So I would teach that way, and I went, I can teach them how to do jazz. So I made up a melody, and then I used the word la. So I said, kids, be my echo. And I went like this, la, 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 la. And the little preschoolers went, la, 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 la. So we did all this, and then I heard the jazz choir sing Heidi Ho. And Heidi Ho is a song, it comes from Minnie the Moocher by Cab Calloway back in 1938. And I knew all this music because I used to, when I was very young, I used to listen to my parents' Victrola radio and record player, and my parents would dance to that song. And so I'm going to teach the kids that song. And basically it goes, Heidi, 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 hi. And the kids go, Heidi, 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 hi. Heidi, 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 ho. Heidi, 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 ho. So anyway, they learned it. Then I went to the jazz choir teacher and I said, do you think I could bring the group of kids up and you guys sing Heidi Ho and we'll be your echo? And they went, great. So we did that. And then when they had that when the Saturday night festival, they asked us to sing at that festival. So we gave ourselves the name, the Pierce College Preschool Jazz Choir. And we sang with the jazz choir at the college. Then the Manhattan Transfer performed and they said, sing Heidi Ho with us, would you? And they sang Heidi Ho and the children sang with them. And we got well known. We went to the International Children's Festival in Los Angeles when Mayor Tom Bradley was the mayor. We sang for that. We sang at all kinds of events. And the parents decked out their kids in these nice suits and beautiful dresses. I mean, they were very proud of this. Well, 5 years ago, I went to a concert put on by the Manhattan Transfer up in Auburn at a festival. After it was over, I went up to them. And there were 2 original members from that group today. And I said, do you guys remember the Pierce College Preschool Jazz Choir? And they went, that was one of the highlights of our career. Thank you.
Excellent. That's really sweet. I remember Manhattan Transfer. Well, that's so sweet. But I have to say, I'm very, very happy now hearing about your teacher that you did burp in her class. Well done, you. Now, before we bring everyone back on to say thank you and goodbye, I just wanted to tell you what's happening for our next show. It's in 2 weeks' time. So that's going to be on August the 16th. And we're going to be doing one of our story slams. We're going to have 5 amazing storytellers. And the theme is going to be True Grit. And you get to vote on your favourite storyteller. So come back August the 16th and come back to our story slam then. So thank you for watching tonight and being a part of Sunday Night Stories. And now I'm going to bring back our storytellers all together, hopefully in a gallery shot, and everyone can unmute themselves. And if they've got something to promote, they're going to just tell you what that is. So first of all, thank you to Sara Armstrong, who put all this together, really. It's really her hard work, not ours, for the Storytelling Association of California. So please support them. And obviously, the proceeds of this night will go to them. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
And thank you to Jean, her partner.
Thanks to you as well. Great evening.
Good.
And to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you to Anne and Terry, who are actually muted, so you might have to unmute yourself to say goodbye. There they are.
We are unmuted.
We are unmuted.
We are both big supporters of SAC, long time members of SAC. But we do have an upcoming performance on the 16th. We've been doing these in our, our shutdown, lockdown community, our street. We do outdoor storytelling.
We had an event today where some neighbors down the end of the street, all three of them, concert violinist, a cellist,
San Francisco Symphony.
Symphony, and did a concert for us out on their lawn. And then we're scheduled to do a storytelling event on the 16th of August. There will be more extension of my Uncle Neil's story because I've got quite a bit to say about him.
So is that in your neighborhood where you live?
Right on our block.
Right.
On your block.
What a great idea.
Lovely. Really nice. And thank you to Neshama.
Hi, so I'll be back on the virtual screen Wednesday, August 19th with Oakland's Story Slam. The theme is cats and dogs, and I will tell a dog story. So go to Oakland's Story Slam and see me again. I love performing, and I'm so glad that we can somehow, hook or crook, still do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Neshama. And thank you to Ed for your lovely story.
Well, I'm really thankful to all the audience that listens, because storytellers need listeners. And also on August 19th, you can have a full evening of storytelling because SAC is putting on a new monthly event that will happen the third Wednesday of every month, and it's called Genre Storytelling. And we have 6 storytellers from different swap groups around California, and they can all nominate one person. And so we get 6 people that will tell a story. So the first one's on personal stories. In September, it's going to be folk tales. In October, it's going to be spooky stories. And then we were going to do tall tales and all kinds of things. But it's a different genre each month. And they will be members of SAC who are part of swap groups. So we want to honor those people and honor the swap group folks.
Excellent.
So that's from 6 to 7:30 on August 19th. And then at 7:30, and we'll be done by probably 7 or 7:15. 7:30 is what Neshama's talking about, which is the Oakland Story Slam. So you get 2 wonderful events going back to back.
So presumably, if people want to be part of that genre storytelling, they need to be a member of SAC.
Yes, so you have to be a member of SAC, and so you can go on, like you come onto this thing, you can go to the SAC website, Storytelling Association of California. It costs $30 to become a member for a year as an individual, and you get so many benefits, all these events that come on, all kinds of information, workshops. I mean, it's just, it really is the clearinghouse for storytelling in California. So everyone should try to join that if you can.
Definitely. We should all support storytelling, and it's nothing, is it? A few cups of coffee. Anyway, so thank you to everybody. I'm really thrilled. A lovely, lovely evening. Hopefully we'll do another one of these again soon. And thank you everyone for watching. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Wonderful
you.
show.
Thanks to the listeners.
Yeah.
6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you. 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical. So step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.